Hello, this is a paper I presented on at Truman's philosophy conference, and I would like to share it with you. It's called Principles with Other Considerations. So this is about Peter Singer's practical ethics, in which he writes an essay supporting what he calls the PEC, which is roughly called the principle of equal consideration. And here's a sentence from it that I thought best characterized the position. It's the idea that we give equal weight to the deliberations of all like interest of those affected. So basically what this is saying is the interest of all beings affected by the actions are considered equally when making moral decisions. And notably, Peter Singer uses this to change the way we might treat animals. We treat animals in a lot of ways that we wouldn't treat humans because they aren't humans. And so if the PEC was true, we would have to treat animals differently because their like interests are affected by the actions, and they would need to be treated equally to humans in many ways. So why should we accept the PEC? Peter Singer gives sort of what is an abductive argument in his essay. At least that is the way I got it and interpreted it. So he essentially says that racism and sexism are wrong and that PEC is the best explanation as to why racism and sexism are wrong. We might have other moral principles or explanations. However, Peter Singer likes to show in his essay that those explanations don't serve us as strongly as the PEC does. And so as long as inference to the best explanation works, we can be justified in believing the PEC, according to Singer. And my paper challenges this argumentation. So some other motives we might have for supporting the PEC is that it's a relatively simple explanation. I gave it in about a sentence and it explains the necessary data pretty well. And there's a degree of intuitive force that the suffering of one being shouldn't be more significant than the suffering of another. We might think like, why should someone's pain matter more than someone else's, even if that other person is an animal? And also, PEC notably doesn't have a sort of bias in the favor of those who hold the position, which is important. So next we have problems with abductive arguments as presented. So the first problem I saw with it is that I believe the argument given had understated evidence and that it didn't exactly show all the evidence that might be important when considering different possible explanations. I also think that there are close alternative explanations that I'll go over later in this presentation that better explain the evidence and data, and Peter Singer doesn't address these as well as I would like. So here's an example of what we might think of as understated evidence. So let's look at the following abductive argument. So let's say that someone stole from the convenience store, and we know from our observation that Thomas was in the store when the item was stolen. If this is the only information we have, sure, the best explanation is that Thomas stole from the store. However, we would want quite a bit more information before proposing a conclusion here. So in the case of the PEC, here are possible understated evidence that wouldn't be covered well by the PEC, but might be covered better by alternative explanations. So it is seemingly okay for us to prefer humans who are family members or close friends over the interest of strangers, and the PEC would reject this completely. Furthermore, it also seems like it's okay to prefer the interest of innocent people over victims of a serious crime. And a good way to sort of test this is if you think like at a trial, if somebody gets a guilty verdict and is going to be penalized for that, you'd rather a guilty person rather than an innocent person be suffering because of that. And that seems to go against the PEC, right? Because the PEC would say the interest of both innocent and guilty people should be treated equally. And in this case, it seems like we might want to favor one person over the other. Also, humans tend to have some moral intuitions that tend toward the interests of humans over animals. Even if some of these animals might not, I mean, some of these intuitions might not be completely valid, there are some papers that sort of try to draw debunking arguments from cognitive dissonance to try to say that these intuitions aren't valid. I think there are other intuitions that even vegans or vegetarians would want to hold as well, that would favor humans over animals. And so I think this is also not really considered in making the PEC a strong explanation. So here's some other possible explanations as opposed to the PEC that I think consider this data better. So the first is what I call PEC star, and this is more or less the PEC, except it only considers the interest of human persons here. And next we have PEC for family. So this suggests that we should give equal weight to moral decision making for people affected by our actions, but we give family members sort of preferential treatment over strangers. This I think tracks with quite a few of our moral intuitions about it being like okay to favor, say, like a family member versus a stranger who's like maybe in trouble or like financially needs financial help. I think people would say like, yeah, sure, you can favor your own family member even if somebody else needs the money more. Also, we might have like PEC for innocent persons. So we might think like in the court example I gave earlier that the moral decisions that we make might also be based on like how guilty someone is, or like if somebody's guilty of a crime, maybe we don't consider their interest of freedom as much as like a guilty person, or like their interest to like not be fined, for example. Our justice system might be built around sort of an intuition that the PEC doesn't apply here. Another possible example is weighted considerations. I kind of wanted to get with this something a bit more vague, but would cover more ground. And this is to say that, yeah, we have like some intuitions that we might support humans or family members other over the interest of others, but like we still want to consider the interest of others. So maybe there's like some sort of weighting here. It's not perfectly equal, but we consider some moral considerations above others and some interest of others above strangers. So must we accept one of my alternative explanations? I don't think so. However, these explanations do explain why racism and sexism is wrong, and I think they all do so equally as well as the PEC does. And so for that reason, I think that the PEC is no longer the best explanation. So returning back to the original argument, racism and sexism is wrong. PEC is the best explanation for why this is so. And then assuming that it's acceptable, we're justified in believing the PEC. And I think we can reject the sort of second premise of this argument that PEC is the best explanation, as we have found other explanations that work quite as well. All right, so here's the paper I was sort of referring to in this essay. Thank you guys. See you in the next one.